In the summer of 1979, a 14-year-old girl left her home in East London with her younger sister. 4 days later, her sister returned alone. Suzanne Lawrence never came home. This is the true story of one of London's long unsolved disappearances. Some disappearances begin with a dramatic moment that everyone remembers. Others begin so quietly that at first nothing seems unusual at all. A teenager leaves home. A younger sister goes with her. Their mother believes they know where they are staying. Days pass. Then one sister comes back and the other does not. That is what happened to 14-year-old Suzanne Lawrence in the summer of 1979, and more than 47 years later, one question still remains unanswered. What happened after Suzanne stayed behind? Suzanne lived in Harold Hill in East London with her family. Later reporting identified the family home as being on Leamington Road. At the time she disappeared, Suzanne was 14 years old. Her younger sister, Michelle, was 13. Suzanne was described in later police reporting as white, slim, with straight dark brown hair. She stood somewhere between 5 feet 3 inches and 5 feet 5 inches tall, and spoke with a local Essex accent. Beyond those basic details, very little about her everyday life has been made public. There are no widely available interviews describing her favorite music, her hobbies, or the small routines that might normally help people picture a teenager as more than a missing person photograph. That lack of personal detail creates a strange contrast with how much attention has been placed on the final days before she vanished. The sequence begins on Friday, July 27, 1979. Suzanne and Michelle left their home in Harold Hill after telling their mother they planned to stay with friends in Dagenham. Later reporting says the sisters instead traveled into central London before making their way north toward Highbury. Somewhere along that journey, the ordinary plan they had described at home changed direction. The sisters eventually reached Highbury Fields in North London, where a fair was taking place. There, according to the account later given to police, they met 3 teenage boys. Investigators would later describe those boys as being approximately 14 to 17 years old, and believed them to have come from the Highbury or Islington area. Their identities were never publicly established. Police have never publicly accused those boys of harming Suzanne. Their importance to the case comes from something more basic. They were among the last known people connected to Suzanne before she disappeared. According to Michelle's account, the boys took the sisters to a nearby squat. In late 1970s London, squatting was widespread. Historical research has estimated that around 30,000 people were living in squatted properties in London in 1979. That wider history explains the kind of housing environment that existed at the time, but it does not tell us anything specific about the property Suzanne and Michelle entered. The address has never been publicly identified. No reliable public description establishes who owned the building, who else was staying there, or how long the property had been occupied. The Metropolitan Police confirmed that Michelle later accompanied officers while trying to locate that squat, but she was unable to identify the address. That single detail created one of the greatest problems in reconstructing Suzanne's final movements. Investigators had a location that could have contained people who saw Suzanne, spoke with her, or knew where she went next, but they did not have a confirmed address they could work from. Later reporting stated that the sisters stayed at the squat for 2 nights. What happened during those nights has never been publicly reconstructed in detail. Then, on July 31st, the sisters argued. The cause of that argument has not been publicly disclosed. Michelle left and returned home alone. She believed Suzanne would follow the next day. That expectation changes how the moment must have appeared to her at the time. Michelle was not necessarily walking away from someone she believed had vanished. She was leaving after an argument with her sister and expecting that Suzanne would eventually come back on her own. But the next day passed, and Suzanne did not return. According to later reporting, their mother contacted police, and Suzanne was officially reported missing on August 2, 1979. By then, investigators were trying to reconstruct a route that stretched from Harold Hill to Dagenham, central London, Highbury Fields, and finally to an unknown squatted property somewhere nearby. They had Michelle's account, but the most important physical location in that account could not be found. Police considered whether Suzanne might have joined a traveling fair. The idea was investigated at the time, but inquiries failed to locate her. No confirmed evidence has ever been made public showing that Suzanne traveled with fair workers after Michelle returned home. The idea produced no known trail, and eventually the investigation was left with the same central gap. Suzanne had been in North London with her sister. She had stayed behind after their argument, and then her movements disappeared from the public record. For decades, almost nothing changed publicly. There was no confirmed discovery that explained where Suzanne had gone, and no person was charged in connection with her disappearance. The 3 boys remained unidentified. The squat remained unlocated. Suzanne's final verified movements remained tied to the account provided by Michelle. Years later, Suzanne's name appeared in a very different investigative context. In 2010, The Guardian reported on Operation Anagram, an investigation examining possible additional victims of convicted killer Peter Tobin. Suzanne Lawrence was named among several unresolved disappearances discussed in reporting surrounding that inquiry. But that mention did not establish a connection between Tobin and Suzanne. No public evidence has linked him to her disappearance, and nothing in the known record supports presenting him as the answer to this case. That distinction matters because long unsolved cases often attract names, theories, and speculation simply because there is so little confirmed evidence. Suzanne's disappearance has never been solved by attaching it to another criminal case. The investigation has always come back to the same core facts from the summer of 1979 and to the people who may still remember what happened during those days. Then, on August 3, 2026, the Metropolitan Police made a renewed public appeal. 47 years had passed since Suzanne left Harold Hill. Police released computer-generated images showing how Suzanne might appear as an older woman. Detective Chief Inspector Cam Sadi was publicly identified as leading the Metropolitan Police investigation, and officers made clear that they were keeping an open mind about the circumstances of Suzanne's disappearance, including the possibility that she may have come to harm. The renewed appeal focused heavily on memory. Investigators again sought the 3 teenage boys who had met Suzanne and Michelle at Highbury Fields. Those boys would now be men in their early 60s. Police also appealed to anyone who knew Suzanne or Michelle at the time, anyone who lived in Harold Hill, Highbury, or Islington in 1979, and former pupils of Neve Comprehensive School. The school was specifically mentioned in the appeal, but the public reporting available does not justify adding biographical details about Suzanne's school life beyond that connection. For Michelle, now publicly identified as Michelle Hooper, the renewed appeal was personal in a way no police timeline could fully express. She said she had been the last member of the family to be with Suzanne before she disappeared. She also said that not a day goes by without her wondering what happened to her sister. Their mother, Michelle explained, is now elderly and has lived for decades without knowing what became of her daughter. That statement gives the case a dimension that dates alone cannot show. In 1979, Suzanne was 14, her sister was 13. Their mother expected both daughters to come home. One did not. Every year after that added more distance from the summer when Suzanne vanished, but it did not provide an answer. The renewed appeal also highlights just how narrow the known sequence really is. Investigators know the date Suzanne left home. They know she traveled with Michelle. They know the sisters reached Highbury Fields and met 3 boys. They know those boys took them to a nearby squat. They know Michelle left after an argument on July 31st. What remains uncertain begins immediately after that point. No publicly verified account explains whether Suzanne remained at the squat for hours, for a night, or for a shorter period after Michelle left. No publicly identified witness has described seeing her somewhere else afterward. The exact address of the property remains unknown in the available public record. The identities of the 3 boys remain unknown. Those gaps are not dramatic additions to the story, they are the story. And that is why the 2026 appeal matters. The police are not asking the public to solve an elaborate puzzle made up of forensic evidence. They are asking people to remember. Someone who was a teenager in Highbury or Islington in 1979 may recognize the circumstances. Someone may remember attending the fair. Someone may remember 3 boys talking about 2 sisters from East London. Someone may remember the squat, not because it seemed significant at the time, but because nearly half a century later, its location could help investigators rebuild a missing part of the timeline. There is also a painful reality behind age-progressed images like the ones released in Suzanne's case. They are created because nobody knows what happened next. They show the face of a person as she might look if she survived and grew older. At the same time, they underline everything that has been lost to uncertainty. Suzanne's family has no confirmed explanation for where she went, whether she lived beyond that summer, or why she never came home. The case remains open, and the Metropolitan Police have said they are committed to finding answers for Suzanne's family. But the passage of time creates obvious challenges. Memories fade, buildings disappear, streets change, people move away. Teenagers become grandparents. A property that could not be located in 1979 may no longer exist in recognizable form today. Still, the case has one advantage that many disappearances do not. There are specific people investigators want to hear from. 3 boys, now men, were present during a critical period. Police believe they were from Highbury or Islington. Even if those boys had nothing to do with Suzanne's disappearance, they may remember details about the squat, the people inside it, or Suzanne's plans after Michelle left. That could help answer questions that have remained untouched for decades. For Suzanne's family, the request is simpler. They want to know what happened. The last confirmed chapter of Suzanne Lawrence's life began with 2 sisters leaving home on a Friday in July. It passed through a fair in Highbury Fields, 3 unidentified boys, and a property police could not later locate. On July 31st, Michelle went home. Suzanne stayed behind. After that, the record goes quiet. More than 47 years later, Suzanne is still missing. Her sister is still asking for answers. Her mother has spent most of a lifetime without knowing what became of her daughter. And somewhere in the history of that summer, between Highbury Fields and an unidentified squat in North London, there may still be a detail that explains why 14-year-old Suzanne Lawrence never came home.